us. Oh, does it say yes? Ah, okay, it does. All right. Well, hey there, Lahana. I'm so glad to have you here on the Confident Sober Women podcast. I'm excited to hear so much. We're going to dive in. This is going to be a content rich episode, like a super practical episode about health and natural wellness. And we're just going to get into all the stuff. But first, I'm going to let you share a little bit more about your story, and then we're going to chat.
Yes, I know. Thank you so much for having me. I love what you're doing because I adore this sober movement that's going on right now. I'm just so obsessed with all of it. So thank you for having me. I am Dr. Lahana Vigliano. I am the founder of Nuvitru. I have my doctorate in clinical nutrition. So I've always been a person that loved health. Literally since I was like 5. I thought I was going to be a doctor. Granted, I thought that was going to be an MD, but slowly transitioned out just because I noticed that honestly it was a pill for an ill. And that was really what healthcare was. And I just felt like there's so much of like, well, why aren't we understanding like why things are occurring in the first place? Right. Like trying to understand their diet and their lifestyle and what's bringing them here. So that's what made me kind of shift outside of the conventional realm. And so when it comes to also alcohol, because that is like what your podcast is all about, I actually have never been drunk in my life. I my mom was probably a little bit more towards a mean drunk. And so I feel like I had that experience growing up. And not that she was abusive, but I just remember like hearing her like bring up things that people did to her like 40 years ago. And I was just like, man, that's just like not the person that I want to be. And I think that was a reason why I kind of steered away from it when I started getting into those teenage years, when the stuff just naturally starts happening at parties and you're just around it more. But I also want to preface that like I'm like an Enneagram 8 for anyone that knows Enneagram. And we are, I think, rebels at heart. So I feel like, and this goes for anything, not even just alcohol, but anytime a lot of people are doing something, I'm usually wanting to do opposite. Because I don't know, there's just like, I don't know, something in me that I'm like, I want to be different. I don't want to blend in. I want to stand out. And so obviously when also everyone's starting to party, I naturally kind of was like, I don't want to. I'd rather focus on school and stay at home and read books. And not that I was a nerd, I cheerlead and all that stuff too. But so I was around it, but I think it was just my experience of my mom drinking and me just wanting to be different. And I didn't even know all the health effects. Like that, if I knew that early, I would definitely be like, no. So I think I was just like leaning into my intuition of what it felt was right. And so yeah, I that's my fun fact is like I've never been drunk and I'm 32 years old. And people are like, when I tell them that, they're like, what? And I honestly don't even think I've ever really drank more than like 3 sips of something. I think the other part too is like you try when you're younger and then you're like, this is disgusting. Like this doesn't taste that great. Like I'd rather have sweet tea. And I could never get over the hump of every time that I speak to someone, they're like, yeah, usually, I started when I was drinking when I was younger. And you do it, right? To fit in, to feel cool, to be like with your friends. And to me, I could just never just overcome that part where I'm just like, yeah, I will just suck it up and get over the taste. I'm like, no, I just kind of get over the taste either. So multifactorial here.
Yes. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit more about your personal story. And this is different because most people who are here with me, as you probably know, are definitely women who are living an alcohol-free lifestyle, but not for the same reasons that you are. Now, some of them are, and I do love, like you mentioned, this incredible movement towards sort of sober living or
Yeah.
alcohol-free lifestyle. And it's refreshing as a woman who's much older than you, but I also have young people in my life. I have 3 kind of young adult, 1 teenager left in my life. So it's refreshing to see people really, especially women, taking a look at uh, substances when it comes to their health.
Yeah.
I don't think that really never came up at all, in our generations,
Yep.
younger when we were younger, and so it is nice. And with that came, comes the explosion of the non-alcoholic drink industry and
Yeah.
all kinds of sober events and things, which, I'm here for all of that. I love it. But, most of the women who are in our community are not living that way because of the same reasons, and that's okay. Some of them are, but I also think it's really important to note that your connection to alcohol. I don't know if your mom would identify as an alcoholic or as somebody who's an addict, but somebody who was not the best, who displayed kind of behaviors or
Yeah.
emotions that were different and a little bit unpleasant when she was using alcohol. That made a big impact on you. So
Yeah.
then you suddenly not suddenly you realized, yeah, I'm really not about this. I don't like
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wouldn't say she was an alcoholic. She definitely drank to cope. So when things felt stressful, she would go to it. And so it wasn't daily or too frequently. There was, I think, seasons where maybe it was a little bit more, but still, yeah, the person that she turned into was definitely not someone that's like, I don't want to be that way. And sometimes it's, I feel like a reason why we still clash to this day, because she doesn't drink anymore, but like it's just very different, like thinking. Like she's a little bit more negative. I'm naturally a little bit more positive. So I feel like that as an upbringing was always kind of that where we were butting heads.
Ooh, that's interesting too. I'm curious a little bit more about that. If I don't want to dive too far or get off track, but I'm curious if you've in your work, just if you could say, I'm wondering, if
Yeah.
you've been able to discover a little bit more about that, particularly as in your older years, maybe through your schooling and then through your own advanced education around gut health,
Yeah.
microbiome, and our brain health and our mood. And I don't know. I'm just curious if what you've discovered about yourself related to that and what might have been going on
Mm.
there.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I've done so much work. I mean, I'm so grateful I do have an upbringing that honestly was like pretty dang good. I mean, I thankfully don't have any massive trauma or anything like that, so I'm very thankful for that. But little T's, big T's, there's all some type of trauma. And even like not just myself, but working with patients because we do have a lot of women that come into us, right, and they're not feeling well, and so they are wanting to take things naturally, but alcohol is a huge hold over them. So it's a conversation that has to come up, and so for women who usually that hold is pretty strong, they're using it as a coping mechanism or trauma that they've never addressed and it's kind of come up in this way. That's something that we have to talk about and bring up and, start reframing, our use of alcohol. And so a lot of women, all of our programs, we take out alcohol in the beginning, but they look back and they're like, wow, like I don't want to drink anymore. And they were dead set on like, I can't take it out for long. I'll do it 3 weeks, but not for long. But once that 3 week mark hits, they're like, oh my gosh, like I'm done. Like I didn't realize how badly I felt. And then that kind of goes into like understanding what their background is. So I usually, for me, I mean, I'm still in therapy. I think everyone should be in therapy. It's so helpful. I mean, who doesn't need therapy? So I'm still unpacking actually my relationship with my mom, and what that looks like because we aren't close. And I'm super close with my daughter. She's 10. I have a 14-year-old and a 10-year-old. And so we are like the complete opposite of like what me and my mom are. So unpacking that because now she has kidney disease and she's honestly probably going to pass in the next couple of years. So I'm preparing my heart and mind and soul for that next transition for her and what that looks like. So that's why we're unpacking that. But outside of that, I don't know if I can speak on anything specific when it comes to like alcohol and her.
Cool. So let's get into it. So obviously you are highly educated in the area of health. And so what was like, I know you said a little bit about this passion came from a very young age. And I'm curious as you sort of went through undergrad and started to really dive into the different areas, because there's so much involved with health, so many different areas to
Yeah.
get into, whether it's, mental health, actual physical health, but like there's policy stuff, there's, cellular stuff. There's so many different areas. So I'm curious as you started to really uncover what part really interests you. Like what was it for you that did it? Like what made you really want to dive into like your graduate program in that specific area?
Yeah. So I was pre-med up until I did it, like I was halfway done with my bachelor's in pre-med. And then that's when I switched to nutrition and I took nutrition all the way through my doctorate. And I always loved learning how the body works. Like I still to this day, like I want to know what the mitochondria does. Like, I want to understand how everything works, how everything's put together. So, I mean, even in high school, like anatomy and physiology, like, so I found that so fascinating.
Yeah.
I just think our bodies are so cool. And that's why I'm such a fan of like taking care of your body because you only have one. And oh, I just love. And then more in the natural realm, I fell in love with the idea of using food and exercise and herbs. I actually love this since I was a kid too. I just didn't know what it was, but I remember reading books on like herbs of like, this is what rosemary can do. And I didn't really know too much about it, but I was like, that's pretty cool. Like, that's a cool plant that we like cook. And so looking back, I'm like, wow, I've always loved herbs. And so just seeing just the power of something so natural in this world to be able to help your health was just I've always like that just sold. And so that's when I connected that like I had that little enjoyment or interest in it, which I didn't really fully know how to put that into my career. And then when I switched to nutrition, I'm like, oh, this is it. Like this is a part of a healthy body. And so that's what made me also understand that this is a root cause to the chronic illness today. Because like I said earlier, how our conventional healthcare system is set up is a pill for an ill, which is needed at certain times of our life and certain things that we may be going through. But a lot of the times that's not where we stop. That might be a stepping point, but it's not where we stop to understand, well, why do I have IBS, right? Why do I have PCOS? Why do I have diabetes? There's something so much more to that. And that can be food, that can be stress, that can be sleep, that can be trauma that we haven't addressed. Like there's so many different areas. And that's why I really fell in love with that holistic viewpoint.
I love that so much. So let's get into it. So you started this practice, and I think you're with several other women. I saw several on your website,
Hmm.
right? So you have a nice team that you've developed on for your practice. And so what is like the just let's just get into like maybe talking about a specific ideal client. So what is maybe the most common thing that you see when you see is it mostly women that come in, only women,
Yeah.
or is it okay? When you see women come in, are they, just to give us a demographic, what age group are they typically? Like,
Okay.
what symptoms are they coming in with? What are they saying is happening? And then and let's get into what do you do?
Yeah. Okay. So I would say I am seeing a movement in the early 20s. And I think this is TikTok and social media, right? I think we're just more exposed to information. So they are actually coming and be like, I want to take care of my body. I don't want to be on birth control or whatever, which I think is so cool. So I would say 25 to 45 is the age range. So everyone from like college to perimenopause. Most women are coming to us usually with a bunch of different symptoms, not always diagnoses like IBS, PCOS, anything gut hormone related. But it's just like, I don't feel good. I can't lose weight. I'm tired. I have brain fog. I'm always bloated all the time. Maybe their period is irregular, or maybe it's regular, but it's really painful. So they usually have just a bunch of different symptoms, and they've honestly been bounced back and forth between conventional med. And I have to tell them that, conventional med is there for disease, right? You have to diagnose and that's how you treat. If you don't have a diagnosis, they can't treat it. There's nothing to treat. In my world, there's so many women in this gray area that don't have a disease, but they don't feel well. And there are things that we can be doing to hopefully not get to the level of disease. We're not trying to wait till we get there. We want to help prevent it as much as possible. Or women that have a diagnosis and they're just honestly interested in doing something more natural because maybe they are on meds, but they're like, I don't want to be on thyroid medication my whole life. Like, what's the reason for this? So there's a big movement there. So that's kind of what they're struggling with. And I would say a lot of our patients also have seen so many professionals. A lot of them have seen conventional care doctors, functional medicine doctors, dietitians, all the practitioners. Which, yes, comes the question, what makes you different? Honestly, I have no idea. I wish I could tell you. I mean, I have seen so many other care plans that functional medicine providers and many other providers have provided, and I have not been impressed. So I will say I have a very high standard. And even for myself, me as a patient, I have such a high standard of what healthcare should look like. And it's very much like avoid gluten, avoid dairy, avoid alcohol, exercise. And that's pretty much a care plan. And I'm like, well, that is so, I mean, what does that actually look like? Right. And I think there's more to it than also food restriction. But anyways, so I see a lot of our patients that have been just bounced around from provider to provider, still have no success, still not feeling well. And yeah, I think that's it. That's all. I think I answered all your questions.
Yeah, and so when they come in with these kinds of things, I mean, what do you typically, so I mean, obviously you've been doing this for a while, you have a great, you already intuitively know, probably because you hear, similar to me, you hear kinds of the same kinds of stories right away. And so right away, what are you aware of? Like, what are you thinking? Like, oh, we need to do this. We need to do that. Like, what are you thinking pretty
Yes.
immediately? What do we need to do?
Yes. And we definitely work in stages. So even if you come to me with like GI stuff or hormone stuff or weight stuff, all of it, all of your body is feeding, it's talking to each other. It's feeding into one another. So if some area in the body's off, it's going to impact the other areas of the body. I usually will recommend starting with gut health because the most important part of everything. It's how we interact with our food. And if we can't even pull our nutrients from our food and digest them properly, then we're definitely not going to have the best hormones. We're not going to have the best nutrient levels just because we can't even digest from our environment. So that's number one. And then also, I think we're at the very, very tip of the iceberg of understanding how gut impacts all the other areas like hormones, weight loss. I mean, studies even show, there's two rats, one's obese and one is skinny, and everything's the same, like what the rats are eating, everything like that. But they'll take the stool from the skinny mice and put it into the obese mice, and the obese or the put the stool from the obese mice into the skinny mice, and the skinny mice will gain weight. Nothing else changed. It's just they had a stool transplant basically. And so I feel like we're just on the very oh my gosh, at the very tip of the iceberg of understanding how that impacts the entire body. So I love starting with gut health because so many women will start to be like, oh, I'm losing weight, but we're not doing anything weight loss in quotes. Or, oh
Mm.
my gosh, my periods aren't painful. We're not doing anything hormone focused, but
Mm-hmm.
we're just working in a pattern that's going to help like create a domino effect of this will improve, then this will improve, then this will improve. But I think the biggest thing that I love to do when first starting to work with a patient that I very, very, very rarely see practitioners do. So to me, this is a red flag, is if your practitioner isn't asking you what life was like in your mom's womb. I think that's all the way back there. And we go from there to elementary to middle to high school and to now, because a lot of how women are feeling is not because of something that's changed in the week. It's usually been happening for years and decades. And so what I want to know is like, yes, how much antibiotics were you on as a baby? Did you have mono in high school? Did you always have stomach bugs in middle school? And your mom was like, you're always getting sick. Did your parents get divorced when you were 5? Were you sexually abused? Were you, abusing alcohol? Were you in an abusive relationship in college? Like, even though people are like, I came to you because I'm bloated. Like, how does that, why are you asking me this? I
Right,
promise there's
right.
such a connection there. And so my goal, and that's true root cause work, is when you understand a person's timeline in their life and their health, you're able to see when their body started speaking to them. And then we're able to actually address the root cause. And sometimes it's like things like trauma that we don't do, but we are actually in the process of hiring a therapist for that reason. But again, that's like my passion. And so that's, if you take away anything, if you're with a practitioner and they're not asking those questions, you're not actually doing root cause work. You're still doing a pill for an ill, even if it's like a natural pill for an ill.
That's pretty profound and slightly discouraging in some ways. I see a lot of functional medicine practitioners as well, and I still use them in my life, and I love them as well. And I find them to
I love
be
that.
very, very, just much more knowledgeable. Like you,
Yeah,
yeah,
for
I think we
sure.
kind of lost faith in the Western medicine system a long
Yeah.
time ago. Obviously, we need it for many things like emergency medicine, orthopedics, things like this. We can't survive with
Yes.
like essential oils on our guts hanging out if we just got in a car accident. Like we need like
Yes.
emergency medicine. We need things, right? But the other stuff that's happening and that's been happening in our country specifically, I can't speak to everywhere else, has been very upsetting and not
Yeah.
only emotionally but definitely upsetting to our bodies. What spoke to me the most that you just said was is well was when you said, when did your body start speaking to you? And I think that's a really important statement to highlight because that's the kind of language that I use in my practice and when we do um trauma work, and especially too because there's so much body work. We know that
Yeah.
today from research that the body holds trauma differently than the brains do, and so we have to work on that part too, that somatic
Yeah.
piece. But when you say it, like it comes to me in a different way because you're speaking specifically from a health standpoint. I know it's all the things,
Right.
but you're saying that to somebody and from a health chair, and you're asking them to sort of feel into themselves
Yeah.
right? And saying, when can you go back all the way in your life? Like, when can you remember the first time your body started speaking to you? And that is really, really profound.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know. And it's so funny when you think about it like that, like, wow, I actually don't know. But when we break it down into like elementary and middle, like little things will come up that maybe honestly you probably thought like were not a big deal because that's how it always starts is it's like little like, yeah, I guess I had headaches like once a month for years. And then, yeah, I guess I developed migraines. And so we only think about the migraine part, but we don't think about when those tiny other little headaches started, when your body did start speaking to you. And there's a bunch of great functional doctors,
Mm.
for sure. I just wanted to clarify that as
Oh
well.
yeah, sure.
But I mean, yeah, a lot of our patients that have gone to see people, it is like, oh, here's, you have inflammation, here's turmeric. And obviously, I love turmeric, obsessed, but that's not solving why turmeric is actually happening or why inflammation's happening. So it is a natural pill for an ill. And I see that more often than I want to admit, which also makes me a little sad too, because I'm like, gosh, like, I mean, yes, we still need Western. Definitely do not come for me if you break a bone. I cannot help you.
Right.
But I'm just like, naturally, I'm like, well, I'll turn to functional. And so I've seen sometimes some of our best patients have come from the best functional doctors here in Austin. And I am so disappointed. And so to me, I think as a patient, I'm like, no, I cannot lose hope in functional either. Like this, there is answers, but unfortunately, I think more often than not, I want people to know that just in case you go look for functional and you didn't get the best experience, don't worry. Please don't give up on it. There's other people out there because a lot of people that come to us are about to give up on it because they're like, it's the same thing. They're just shoving me with a bunch of supplements. And I'm like, I promise that is not what everyone is like.
I appreciate that, and I think that's really important because because it's like baby stepping. Like we're like baby stepping our way to who knows what. I don't know. It won't be in my lifetime, I'm sure, but to actualization, right?
Yeah.
To maybe I don't know if it's a return. I don't really like return, but maybe it's value alignment with what would you say? Maybe like older. Uh, I'm thinking farmers. I don't know what the word would be. Like a return to our ancestry, maybe,
Yes,
or
yes,
like
yes,
ancient ways. I
yes.
don't know. I'm having a hard time describing it, but like, and not a return because we're obviously civilized. We're not
Right,
going to go back to not having computers, but we're going
right.
to return in a way to understanding the entire system of all of these things. And so I like this
Yeah.
because what you're doing is almost exact. I mean, you're doing like trauma. What you're doing is almost exactly what I do with EMDR, which is amazing. But
I
I
love EMDR. Oh,
yeah, me
crazy
too.
you.
That's what I do. But you're doing a lot of that work, but from a physical health medical slash standpoint, but it's all the same. And I say that here too. Like
Yeah,
it's we're all one body, we're one system.
yeah,
We're not one heart, we're not one foot, we're not one brain. Like we're all one system and it's working together no matter whether we think it is or not. But so we're
yeah.
like, I think we are baby stepping our way back to viewing it as that, like a very
Yes.
holistic, I guess, approach, a very
Hmm.
holistic approach where we view all of those things. And so people like you are cropping up and now being like, oh, let's merge these things together. Let's look for
Yeah,
the origin story, and
yeah,
then insert EMDR slash brain spotting slash neurofeedback, and then by the way, also let's eliminate some of these things, add in some nutraceuticals, and then wham, we've got this solution that is treating that whole system
yes.
instead of just one. Yes. Oh my gosh. I'm like having this major revelation about this. This is really profound. So
Yay.
when you start to do that, so like I noticed on your website that you have like testing, you offer like different kinds of correct me if I'm wrong, like blood testing, maybe
Hmm.
you have urine saliva. I'm not sure what else you do to do what are you looking for in those
Yeah.
tests?
And I would say our most common test, because like I said, I kind of go back to gut first. And that is usually stool testing. So I am looking for inflammation. I'm looking for how you digest your food. I'm looking for little buggies. I always say we're a little Airbnb and we host lots of buggies. So we got to make sure we're feeding them well. So like short chain fatty acids, bacteria, parasites, viruses, yeast, how we detoxify. I mean, obviously pooping is detoxification, but detoxifying, there's certain enzymes in our stool that can tell us if we're detoxifying well, or if we're reabsorbing certain hormones and toxins that have processed through the liver and trying to leave the body if they're being reabsorbed, which obviously causes an issue. So that's what our stool test is looking for. But yeah, we do blood sugar, we do full thyroid, we do female hormones. We do environmental toxins and mold, because that's definitely a big part of the picture as well that I love talking about, because I think it's very important because we don't talk about it as much. So a little bit of everything, but I, again, am a fan of just like focusing on one area. We do nutrient deficiencies. So usually most people are like stool testing first, nutrient deficiencies next. Then I would say most women are like, I really want to look at my hormones. And hormones are fantastic, but they're following the lead of other areas of the body. So if you want better female hormones, you have to have a better gut, you have to have balanced blood sugar, you have to have a good thyroid. Like all these things have to be good before I look at estrogen, because all that's going to give me is just more answers of like, cool, you have high estrogen. Well, are you reabsorbing it through the gut? So do you have a gut health issue? Are you being exposed to it through environmental toxins like phthalates and BPA and parabens? All these things are influencing our estrogen. So that's why I try to keep that last, even though most women at that point are like, I just want to see. So we usually will do them that with the cortisol and adrenals to assess stress hormones. So looking at a lot of things, because again, it all
Yeah.
matters.
It's very comprehensive. And I think it's important for people to understand if you walked into your medical provider, which I'm sure many of you probably had these experiences. I know I have, although not very often because I don't generally go to Western medicine doctors. However, I recently had over the last several years very, very negative experience because I had to go to one because I needed a physical for my insurance. My husband's company offered like a discount or something. And I was like, fine, I'll get and this was a female doctor too. And I thought I had a right, I thought I had a good match. Usually I get a decent recommendation. And she told me that when I'm 49 years old, so I'm obviously perimenopausal, things are happening.
Well, you
And
look
I said
fantastic.
a year or two, thank you. I said to her, this is probably like 2 years, 3 years ago, and I said I wanted to have my hormones tested, which by the way I do every single year with my GYN because she just does it for me. And she said, "Oh, we don't do that." And I was like, "Excuse me?" And she said, "Oh, we don't just do that. We know it's like sort of saying like if your daughter was getting your puberty, like we know she's in puberty, so we don't want to test for it." And I'm like, "Oh, that's so interesting because I do it every year, and I'm asking you, I'm your patient, to provide this for me because I feel like I pay my insurance. Anyway, it was the whole drama. I was very upset because I felt like she
I
wasn't listening to me
I'll
when
never
maybe
understand that.
I'm not sure why she cared because all you do is check off the boxes. But basically,
Yeah.
she tried to tell me that this is why that have high costs in medical care because we're making unnecessary tests. And I'm like, this like $10 lab test is what's causing medical prices to rise. But whatever. I just was like, had to move on. Anyway, we had a whole thing about it. So if you walk into your regular, my point was, is if you go into your regular doctor, they're not going to talk to you in this way about these kind of things. So it's so important for you to get connected. And I'm not saying you shouldn't have a primary care doctor. Sure, have a
Yep.
relationship. It's good. But also find somebody like Lahana to incorporate in your life, somebody who will do some of this extra testing because they don't even have
Yeah.
access to the stuff that you're offering. So I think it's important to have a comprehensive package,
Yeah.
a team
Yeah.
approach, right?
Yes.
Like we have a therapist, we have a nutritionist or a type, we
Mhm.
have somebody who can do energy testing and work on our bodies and say like, oh gosh, you have inflammation in this area. Oh gosh, you have mold in your body and let's use this nutraceutical to clean that out. But somebody
Yeah.
who's trained in that. So anyway, it's a team approach.
It
So
is. It is. And that's on one more thing too on
yeah,
that is like you are so not alone. That's unfortunately such, I don't know. I think it's an insurance thing, but I'll never understand like if you want to know like something in your body, like it's not that like the doctor is personally paying for it. I'm like, I don't even care if, insurance may cover some, but I'll pay enough or I'll pay extra. But it's like you just want to know. And so I would say that is like my biggest pet peeve is just them denying it, or they'll be like, yeah, 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 we'll run it. And then like we'll get it back. And it's like, oh, they actually didn't run like everything that they said they would. Because again, conventional is there to do a diagnosis. So if there's no diagnoses, they can't do anything for you. And I think we all have to like understand that. So we know like that's what we're getting is we're just getting someone who is trying to diagnose. And then if there is no diagnosis, then that's
it's
it.
really just a shift in the mindset. And
Yeah.
again, like I see like my chiropractor does all my nutraceuticals and does all my body testing. he's been specifically excuse me, trained in that way. And he even says, look, I'm not a doctor. He said doctors are smart people. I'm not saying that
Yeah.
they're bad. I'm not telling you your doctor said something that's wrong. And that's what I say. Like, these are not dumb people. They went to medical
Right.
school. These are very, very smart individuals. They were trained in a
Right.
very specific way in our country specifically. And so that's not their fault. That's the
Yes.
training and the protocol that is used here in the United States to provide medical training to our physicians. And so they're brilliant, they're skilled, they know exactly what they're supposed to do, but they are influenced very highly by the narrative around our pharmaceutical companies. And I'm sure everybody
Yes.
knows this by now, but I mean that's what they
Yeah.
are. They have to do that. And
Yeah.
so that's why people like you and people like, the new Means, I'm sure Casey Means and their book What
Yep.
Energy and all the good stuff that's coming out around them. That is so phenomenal and eye-opening for people as we start to take a look. And I said, yeah, like I said, you don't need to eliminate having a physical every year. Like, cool, go get your cholesterol,
Exactly.
but also ask the questions like, what does this mean that my cholesterol was high? Because when you do that and you start to see like, oh, actually the measures that we use to the numbers to calculate cholesterol in this country really aren't that accurate.
Yeah.
And what is that's what my he helped me so much. He's like, well, what is cholesterol? It comes from
Yeah.
stress, right? And he showed me the whole graph. These are the things that can cause cholesterol to rise, and it's all
Yeah.
stressors that make more cholesterol to move things out of your body. I had zero idea that that's what was happening. Clearly,
Yeah.
did not know. So it's just really about asking
Yep.
questions, not taking everyone's word for it, even if somebody's getting offended or they get upset with you or whatever happens. Just trust yourself and your body.
Yeah.
So I want to get a little practical to end things here because I want to make sure everyone can leave with some really good stuff that they can start to implement right now. So when you're working with your clients and even yourself and um, in your life, what are some of the first like kind of 101 things that you go to? I mean, most of us, like you said, we hear the things like we know we're supposed to drink a ton of water, right? I drink a gallon of water a day. We know we're supposed to move our body. We know that we should try to eat well and things. But what would be a few things that literally we could start doing like in the next few days that make a huge impact in our gut health and like overall the way we feel?
Yeah, of course, diet is like number one. Or I don't know, I feel like so many things equal number one, but diet is right up there. And I think that there is a lot of noise and like what you should be eating, what should you not be eating. You see one thing 1 minute saying this is great, and then the next minute you see it's so bad. And I really do want to emphasize by the need of bioindividuality, that we're all different, and that is why there is not a one size fits all diet. And even certain things that could be healthy, like salmon, to one person won't be healthy. They actually may not react that well. And so that's where it does dial down to your specific needs. So testing is really where that's going to tell you. But I also don't think we have to make it complicated. I think when we just look at our plate and ask, can I grow that or can I kill that? If you can answer yes, then you're usually eating just real wholesome foods. And if that's the most basic thing you can do, just start working on that. Again, it can get a little bit more complex when you're like, but when I eat broccoli, it bloats me. There's different things. But if by chance a lot of foods feel triggering to you, that usually means that there's something more going on in your gut, and you probably should do stool testing, because just restricting foods long term is not the solution, right? Just like I said, a natural pill for an ill, that is an absolute band-aid. Food restriction is a band-aid. It may be helpful and needed short term, but that is not your long-term solution. We want to understand why your body may be flagging this down as dangerous. But eating just real wholesome foods, and I would even say to assessing, because you might be like, well, I have like Simple Mills crackers and all these healthier processed foods, which when people are in a healed season, that's usually not a big deal. But if you're in a healing season where you do have to really hone in on that, honestly, again, sticking to real wholesome foods, even monitoring the amount of healthier processed foods that you're having. So I'm all about like getting down to the simple basics. It doesn't have to be complex like that. And that's a really great place to start. And then I would say my number two is stress. Because I have people, we actually don't have a lot of patients that come to us and eat really bad. Like, I think a lot of people may think like, oh, well, you probably get a lot of people that are eating like standard American diet. And really, actually, most women are really trying their hardest. They're like trying to prioritize veggies and protein and just all these things. So they're actually not eating terribly. Um, but their diet can be really great, but their stress is just out the wazoo. And so that can look like potentially changing your exercise. Maybe you're like, well, I'm exercising every single day. Well, maybe you don't need to be exercising every single day. Maybe we need to start getting more into a rest and digest mode and not a fight or flight all the time. Sometimes that's addressing like past trauma. Sometimes that's just saying no to things and just, some our schedules are so bombarded. And I'm like, honestly, I don't see anything in there that looks fun to you. It's all work and kids and all these other things. Where's the thing that you enjoy reading books or watching a movie? Like, where is that? So sometimes it's just real simple of just saying no more, less commitments, and just more time for doing something that you enjoy. And going back to the diet thing, one extra thing is just making sure that we're eating enough. If you are eating anything less than 1,500 calories, you are pretty much close to eating like as much as a toddler should. And we are grown women who also, a lot of us, if we're in our reproductive phase, we're in the stage of growing a human. So I don't know why we're eating like toddlers and we're trying to grow a baby. So I would say that's hands down, and 90% of women we see is they're under eating. And that is making them tired. That is making their hormones off. That is actually hurting their gut microbiome because caloric restriction long term actually decreases our diversity in our gut bacteria, which we need a very diverse gut. So if you can focus on real wholesome foods and eat enough, and that depends on everyone, but please nothing under 1,500 if we need a marker to go by, that's what I would recommend.
I love that. And so you say real wholesome foods, which is great. And most of us have heard, like you said, most of the women that most people that are seeking out services like that. Now, some of them might be in like disrepair, right? Or
Mhm.
maybe they have been dealing with kind of a chronic illness, or they've been down that medical road where they're heavily medicated on multiple diagnoses. And they're like, I'm done with this. I'm ready for a solution. So they might not be, in a great
Yeah.
state searching and looking for somebody like you and end up. And then you do have a lot of room for, okay, let's hit the pavement, and a lot of it is around education because let's face it, we only know what we know, and most of it's whatever we grew up with. Like I always say, if
Yes.
you grew up with a family who only ate, boxed mashed potatoes, there's something wrong with that. But if that's what you knew, if you did not grow up with, homemade food, or you had, constantly had Oreos or chips, like, just mostly processed foods, and maybe your mom was even like relatively healthy or thin and she was fit, but like you just weren't, you weren't raised in a family where there was like a lot of that. Like you don't know, like you don't even
Yeah.
know that those things are options. So it's not your fault, So sometimes I feel like some people get really caught up in that, like they
Yeah.
feel like, oh, well, I don't know, then we want to blame ourselves. But a lot of times this is just, we didn't know any better. We only
Yeah,
know what we know.
was the saying like you know better, do better. And I was right
Yes.
there with you. I was totally making instant mash, you guys, when I was pre-med. I didn't know anything, and I was a teen mom, so I mean, I learned a little bit from my mom of like cooking and stuff, but I was very basic, like canned green veggies or green beans and instant mash and maybe some pre-marinated. I have no idea what I was doing, you guys.
Yeah.
So it's just like you learn a little bit and then you make little changes, and then now I look back, I'm like, gosh, I can't even imagine Lahana being 20 and doing that because I've come so far. And, right, we all have a day one.
Absolutely. And I want to highlight too that like one of my personally my philosophy in my own life, but mostly what I teach in my practice too. And a lot of it is because I need it as a kind of recovering perfectionist and sort of majorly type A aggressive pursuer of things that are like not going to be the healthiest way of living. I have to remind myself that like doing tiny things, like simple things every single day, and then we don't deviate from that over time leads to those big transformations. So,
Yeah.
like for me, I'm a recovering addict, so everything is like yesterday. I don't understand why I haven't had any changes after 5 seconds, and so it's hard to like listen to you and say when my trainer said, um, this was several years ago and I was going into phase, I think it was COVID, or I was in a not a good place. And I just needed to like
Yeah.
regroup. And so I reached out to this woman who's a friend of mine. I love her. And she was like, okay, I just want you to drink a gallon of water a day. And I was like, okay. And I'm like, here's my list. And I'm like, all right, okay. And she's like, that's it. I'm like, no way. That's not it. Like I can't do that. I mean, I can do that, but I'm not going to just do that. And it was
It's too
really
simple.
hard to like just, so my point is like when we pick these small, my point in bringing it up was that it can be very overwhelming to the point of breakdown. And I've had them
Yeah.
where you're like, oh, I gotta get my gut clean and I can't do that. Like where you're just like, whoa, pump the brakes. I'm sure you do this
Yeah.
in your practice, but I'm telling you, all of you listening, just start with one
Yeah.
area. And maybe if you say, okay, I want to work on my food, fine, pick one meal. Like, okay, I'm
Yeah.
going to work on breakfast. I'm going to work on right now I'm eating a power bar and Dunkin' Donuts full sugar coffee for breakfast. Okay, what can we do to change that one meal
Yeah.
to a completely whole food situation with no processed foods? Just that one meal, or like I want to move my body. I always tell my clients you could do 20 minutes a day, 3 days a week, minimum. That is your goal. But sometimes you might feel great and you're out there and you're for your walk and it's been 20 minutes. You're like, man, I feel great. So you just keep going.
Yeah.
Fine, keep going. And some days you might have another day where you're like, actually, I want to go out again. So, but the minimum was three. So whatever
Yeah.
you do more than that is extra. So we start with these tiny baby steps, add to it over time. I know you're nodding, so you totally agree. Because it can be like, oh, so much. And then we see the Instagram posts and we see this and we read the books and we're
Yeah.
like, oh my God. So just pick somebody like Lahana to follow. She has a podcast as well. She's got a fabulous website. You can follow people like Casey Means. I love her. We have the book. It's very thick.
Love that.
I'm like, and mitochondria kind of makes my eyes like want to roll back a little because I'm
Oh,
just not like you. So I'm like, holy smokes, it's a little sciencey, but I'm kind of
I love
making
that.
myself doing it because I just want to reintegrate those things and concepts into my brain, even though I know
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to really retain it to like teach somebody that
Yeah.
science, but
Yeah.
it's changing the neural pathways in my brain, and I really want that. So,
I love
for
that.
everybody listening, I want them to just try to do that. So, for those two people who want to get a hold of you, where do you like them to reach out the most?
Yes. And one note on social media is please don't compare yourself to what you see because some of these people that we may follow and look at their body and be like, holy cow, she looks amazing. That's goals. I also have run lots of labs on people like that, and they are not so healthy inside, even though they have washboard abs and literally look amazing outside. So please don't compare because you don't truly know what's going on inside and like let that burden be off of you. Because sometimes, honestly, the women that are the healthiest inside, I think, hold a little bit more body fat than our society would naturally accept. I feel like those are the people that's like, oh, you could lose 10 pounds. Honestly, they have really great hormones and a lot of good stuff inside. So please don't let that view make you feel bad about yourself because I don't see that. So Instagram's my favorite place at Nuvitru Wellness, NUVITRU Wellness, all one word. And our website is nuvitruwellness.com. We're on all the other platforms, TikTok and stuff like that too, but Instagram is primarily where I'm at.
Awesome. And what's the name of your podcast and where can we find it?
Functional Nutrition Radio, and that's just me. And then Power Women Wellness, where I'm interviewing women in power on their health routines.
Oh my gosh, amazing. I want everyone to go follow Lahana and all of her work. She's got amazing stuff to offer you. And if you haven't done any of this, if you haven't if you haven't dived into this area of your life, and consider doing this kind of functional medicine testing or whatever, give it a shot. Like there's no big commitment. Like it's not like you're signing away your life for thousands of dollars. It's usually kind of a low level commitment. You could just give it a little bit of a shot and try it. Say, hey, like, yeah, let me do a little bit of testing, or let me experiment with what it would be like to not eat these granola bars, Quaker granola bars, and maybe I experiment with making my own. Like I
Yep,
make my own from whole food ingredients. Like that's the other thing I always think is important, that most of the things that we love to eat that are processed and easy, we can figure out a way to do it ourselves. And yes,
totally.
it's a little bit of effort, but when you put the effort in, then sometimes you can freeze things or we can like package them so that they say last a long time. But there's usually an option we can replace. So don't be afraid to check out, something in this realm. It's not scary. It doesn't have to be overly expensive. It doesn't have to be crazy. And it can be really, really, really impactful to your health. So thank you so much for your time, for your talent.
Yes.
And I'm super excited to get everyone in my community linked with you so that we can all start being healthier, raising healthier kids and communities and a whole country, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Shelby.
Thank you so much. No, hold
Amazing.
on one second.